happy to have you with us. So excited about what's been going on, and it's been a minute. And as you know, these are the last weeks of The Bachelor with Clayton. So we're just covering everything up to date from the Woman Tell All and on. I think in my last video, I may have put episode 9. So a little bit of correction. Woman Tell All episode is episode 9. And we'll just take it from there. So I'm really excited to be here and speaking with you all about what's been going on. There has been so much going on, you all. There has been so much going on. It's almost hard to digest. But let's get to it together because I know that you've been watching, and if you haven't, that's okay because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to catch you up on everything. So the Women Tell All episode was very, very revealing. I think more so into people's characters, especially the ones, in my opinion, who were trying to expose everyone else's. But I think it was very, very entertaining if you did see it. And I just have a lot to say about it. There was just a bunch of screaming, I feel, more than usual. I don't recall a women's tell-all where women were standing up as much as they were clapping in terms of trying to get their point across. And then also even interrupting the host. I mean, it was quite interesting. So let's get right into it. Shanae, nay, was a big topic of the Women Tell All. I mean, she was totally, let's see if I can find a word for this. Just torn apart, ripped apart. I mean, if this was like a mauling, it would be like a bear mauling, you know, I don't know, maybe another bear, maybe in a bear fight. I don't know. It was just quite gruesome in terms of what she withstood. And I'm not defending her or anything. I think she was being as genuine as she could be. And I said that in my other videos. And having had her be kind of mentored by Cassidy, who was there and got gone in like week 2. I'd love for you guys to all to see the videos that I have on. Cassidy kind of mentored her for a little bit for like the first 2 weeks that she was on the show. And then Shanae turned into Shanae. And so I guess the ladies were mad at the Shanae they got. She was much more into finding time with Clayton than any of the other ones, and she rubbed them the wrong way. So that was a huge topic. The women were screaming at her, calling her a liar. Sierra, specifically, who I have said is very outspoken, was just telling her, along with other women there, saying, "Oh, she's, a horrible person. She's a bad person." Um, it was just not a pretty sight. When she went up to talk to Clayton, because there was a time when Clayton, or I'm sorry, when she went up to talk to Jesse, because Jesse's the host, and sometimes they invite some of the women up to have a one-on-one talk. I even heard some comments from some of the women from made about her, specifically Genevieve. I heard her saying, and maybe some of the other women, but I believe I saw Genevieve's a cut to Genevieve and her mouth moving. They were talking about her dress and even her undergarments and saying her body parts look bad. I mean, Genevieve, Sierra, and some of the other women who were screaming at Shanae held Shanae to such a high standard, but they didn't really climb much above it with the way they were like speaking to her and everything and the way they behaved. I mean, why do we have to talk about, oh, her butt looks bad and is she wearing a diaper? All these things that were caught up by the mic. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, like this is really getting not so nice. I mean, it really wasn't. And I understand they had a lot of pent up resentment regarding her, but did we need to see all of that? Then, for some reason, Jesse invited Genevieve up to speak and with Shanae. I don't know if they expected there to be some sort of, kumbaya moment or something, but that was quickly um, done away with. So anyway, moving on. I also there was also a little part up there when um, Sarah was confronted about her actions toward Clayton and also being told that she's a liar and she was fake crying. And Clayton said to her, like, hey, I don't know at the end of the day if you were not fake crying, but I just didn't believe you. And then she continued to lie and she said, oh, he cried to me when the ladies asked her, hey, did he cry to you? And she said, yeah. So then basically she lied again and she said allegedly to well, Clayton said it was not true when he got on the stage and confronted Sarah. And they said, well, actually, we were just talking about this. And she said that you cried. And he's like, no, I didn't. I know I've been crying a lot throughout the season, but I didn't cry. So they're like, okay, so you're a liar. And then also Sarah kind of deflected on Clayton. She started deflecting her actions on him, saying, "Oh, you kind of caused me to be in the whole commotion with the ladies again." And I'm thinking, Sarah kind of got away from the women's tell-all pretty easily. She deflected it on Clayton, which I think was probably easy for her to do, being that we all knew about the controversy about this season. And so it was very easy for her to say, hey, he's the culprit. Yeah, let's blame my behavior on him too. So that was kind of interesting. We also spoke with, I think, Teddy a little bit. We also spoke with Serena a little bit. Uh, Again, Sierra is very outspoken. She outspoke everyone, including the host, because when Jesse was speaking, she and kind of closing everything out, she interrupts and she's like, "Oh, and I wanted to say, how dare you, Clayton? How dare you treat the women this way? And how dare you do this?" Like, she called it a casual relationship that she had with this man. And she said she feels like she should not have gotten blamed for keeping that casual relationship up until she got onto the show because she is out here, she feels she's a modern woman, and this is how she is conducting her dating life. And she wasn't really even dating this guy, that she was casually seeing him, um, as she said. So on one hand, we have someone like Cassidy who's saying, hey, let me conduct my life the way I want to conduct it. And then on another hand, and saying, hey, and I take responsibility for that, and then being basically pushed off the show because of it. And on the other hand, we have people like Sierra who's blaming Clayton, and maybe the other woman for blaming Clayton for basically sleeping with two of the finalists. This is a consenting adult situation. They have responsibility too, where they had a choice to go into the fantasy suite. We'll talk more about that later. And even if you go into the fantasy suite doesn't mean something needs to happen, but I will say going into the next episode, we did see kind of in episode 10, week 9, Jesse, the host, kind of talking that up. He really kind of gave the ladies a speech leading into the fantasy suites, like, hey, this is the fantasy suite. This is really the opportunity for you to make the most of it. Da 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 da. And I felt like his speech was almost like gearing up, like, hey, it's now or never. Do what you got to do. Thing. I don't know. I just kind of got the sense that he was really gearing them up for this fantasy suite. I could be wrong. Let me know. And then the lady started talking about the topic. What if he's intimate with someone else? What about this? I told him to explore the relationships. But then they kind of backtracked later and was like, well, I don't mean that. Susie was pretty much explicit, like, what if he is doing this with other women in the fantasy suite, and the fact that this was very important to her. Physical intimacy was very important to her. And so if that's the case, then and if she feels that Clayton is really into her, loves her, and wants to be with her the most, we'll get to that word because that came up a lot, then he wouldn't want to be intimate physically with the other woman. And so this was being talked about. Gabby said he wanted him to fully explore the other relationships. And there seemed to be some sort of dynamic of that. So when it came up later on that that's exactly what he did, I feel like it's a little unfair to put all the blame on him. Now, we'll get more into that about the whole in love thing, which I think he definitely could have, as Gabby put it, have some discretion. But let's get on the date with Rachel. So Rachel had the first date when they were in Iceland. They went on a helicopter in Iceland. They propelled down a volcano, and that was an act of course. And during the date, she did ask him, "Hey, do you have any reservations?" And he said no. You get a cut back to the hotel. Gabby thinks she, you know, wants the man to be with to go ahead, like I said, and explore all the other relationships and see how, what it feels. She's like, yeah, do it. So to me, again, that was a reiteration of her saying, I know he may go and explore these other relationships in the way he did. So, but it came back to bite him. And maybe they weren't clear. Maybe that's not what they meant, but that was kind of like almost what was expected. This is fantasy week. So from not expected, but expected, if you know what I mean. So and again, I want to be clear. There have been fantasy suites where people have gone in fantasy suites, and I'm sure nothing has happened in that department. And they've chatted and they've talked. And there have been some situations where people just don't want to put themselves in that scenario, and they don't go to fantasy suites. It's the choice is yours. So Susie and her thing had a more balanced approach to Gabby, because Gabby was like, yeah, do it, sure, whatever, like explore those relationships. And Susie was like, hey, I don't know how I would feel if he explored those relationships fully. So and she kind of stuck with that same theme, where I feel Gabby, on the other hand, kind of railed back her explore the relationships as much as possible take, because I guess maybe she was predicting how she would feel, or but then at the same time, no one really knows how they're going to feel when they're put in that situation, when that actually takes if that actually took place. So Rachel's date continues with dinner. She admits how nervous she was before, and he tells her, he's falling in love with her. They do have the fantasy suite. Um, So going back, to the time in the hotel, Susie starts talking about how she would like to know what his intentions are at every step, because she says she would question them if he did sleep with another woman. And I think it would have been very important that she would have asked him before going into the fantasy suites, because then she could make her decision or not whether or not to go to the fantasy suite during the fantasy suite dates. Uh, Maybe you've seen it. She never made it to the fantasy suite, and we'll get to that. But I think she should have been clear with him as to what her expectations were to him. But maybe if she were, it wouldn't have ended up the way it did. And we'll talk about that too. So, Susie also was running through every scenario in her head, and it just really just did not help. Um, when Rachel gets back from the date, because they had the fantasy date, her suite was really nice. You can see them like cooking breakfast in the morning with eggs and things like that. I noticed they left the little white things on the eggs. I always like to take those out, but you know, to each their own. But they were like frying up eggs and like doing all these things. Anyway, yeah, tell me in the comment section if you're like that too with your eggs. If you eat eggs. I mean, sometimes I don't eat those uh byproducts, but anyway, so I going back to Rachel's when she came back to the suite speaking with the other lady, she goes, "Really sorry in advance." To me, that was like an admission that something might have gone on. I mean, I was reading through the lines when she said that. She's really sorry in advance. And to me, I think that kind of messed with Susie's head a bit because she was saying, Clayton said it was a near perfect date. Later, he said it was perfect. This sort of wishy-washy, like going back and forth response made me kind of gave me um, a foreknowledge of kind of like where his head was at. He was confused. He was a confused man. And so was Susie at the hotel. She was confused because she feels like he is so great for her, but at the same time, she feels like it's too good to be true. Her suffering's prolonged because the next person on the date is Gabby. She's the next up for the fantasy suites. And they go to this fun buggy ride that kind of like fits her personality, I think. Even though she had a very specific idea of what she wanted for a date. She's like, I would love to go on a cruise and watch the whales. But she didn't get that. She got the buggy ride. Clayton says his date with Gabby was about as perfect as it gets. There we go with the word perfect. So this kind of goes into like I feel his mentality of what he was expecting. Something perfect, perhaps. It seems like he's content with her not always putting up her funny front. Susie back at the hotel, she's like spiraling out of control with her thoughts as she's walking down the spiral staircase. We see her walking down the spiral staircase thinking about Clayton and what he could be doing and what he could not be doing and how it would be crazy for her to think this way or not crazy for her to think that way. Wondering if he's being intimate with Gabby. She was really driving herself up the wall with her thoughts. And I mean, I guess who could blame her? She really, really loved this man. At least she thought she was. And so for her, it was very painful and hurtful for her to think about what he could be doing with Gabby. Clayton has a fantasy suite with her in the yurt, and it's in a remote area. I didn't think her suite was as nice as Rachel's, to be honest. Like I think Rachel's suite was the best. I think it was in a hotel. It was really nice. This was like a yurt. It seemed like a luxury yurt or whatever, but she basically described it just as like a bed in the middle. So I'm like, okay, where's the couch? Maybe they want to sit on the couch and talk for a little bit, you know? Okay. So at some point, I think he tells Gabby that he's falling in love with her or is in love with her. He goes on to say, "Hey, I'm with a kind of like a smile on his face, actually. I don't know if you all caught that. I wish we can maybe go back to the video, but if you check that episode out, he goes back to it and he's like, "I'm about to hurt someone's feelings for sure." And there's like a little bit of a smirk on his face. So I don't know if I mean, like, I'm not saying Clayton's a bad guy, but could he have been getting some sort of pleasure from hurting these women's feelings? I hope not. I don't think so. So again, I was talking about Susie spiraling out of control with her feelings, but she keeps saying that these are very real reasons. She tries to get in the mood for the date. Clayton and Susie go to the Sky Lagoon. That looks like a fun place to go. And that's where they have the hot springs, I believe. So he actually says on the date, like, I plan on telling Susie that he loves her. And he does tell her. that he loves her. Then she asked him kind of indirectly if he slept with other people or has slept with them because it would be impossible for she and he to move forward. I'm not sure if she should have said that, all of that, like saying, "Hey, it's impossible for us to move forward," because I don't know if he would have like, what if he would have like not told her the truth? But at the same time, he still gave her a truthful answer. But he did say he at that moment that he was the most in love with her. She says she doesn't think that she can get past those things because he was with another woman. He apologized for sleeping with them and admitted to sleeping with them both because he said, "Yeah, I sleep with someone." Then he said both. He like kind of blurted it out. Um, it didn't go well after that. He starts whining to her, "Well, why didn't you tell me this in advance to our date?" He feels she should have told him. She feels that kind of in a sense that he should have known. Like if he really loved her and if he really only saw himself with her or if he loved her the most as he put it, then maybe he should not do those things with the other woman. Like he just shouldn't. He should have some discipline and or say, I value my relationship with her the most since I love her the most, and I'm not going to sleep with these other women. He didn't have to extend the fantasy suites to them. And if he did, then maybe he could have slept on the floor. I don't know what level of self-control this man has. He's a former football player. I don't know. Does that mean he's more disciplined than most? I don't know. But I know they have very stringent workout routines. Has to take some level of discipline to do all that, I would think. So anyway, then there's just a lot of back and forth. And he goes, I just don't, there's that scene where he goes, I just don't believe anything anymore. He feels everything is completely invalidated, everything. Then he kind of turned it around on Susie in that moment, and he's like, basically invalidating her and her experience. He's like, "Oh, you could have told me. Why didn't you do this?" And, I don't think you this. He really turned it around and he's like, "I don't even know who I'm looking at." He said a lot of mean, hurtful things. Later, he explained he was saying it out of fear of losing her, fear of, this, I guess, whole thing falling apart. Just he said it out of fear and he was upset and hurt. But he said a lot of mean, hurtful things. And he said that basically he felt this whole experience and his heart was like ripped from him and that he had nothing more to say to her and he kind of like shooed her away and said, "Go, bye." And he bye Felicia'd her, and I feel like the way he did it was not the best. It wasn't a good way to break up. But we see that he does regret it. So, two women, Gabby and Rachel, are left. He basically told Susie to kick rocks, and she said she was like I think she was in shock when she was writing back, and later she said she felt completely humiliated by the whole experience. So in episode 11, week 10, the finale, we're talking about the finale, the season finale, part one. So the host, Jesse, called this the rose ceremony from hell. I guess he coined it that. It was quite intense. It was brutal. I mean, I would use a word for it, and it starts with a D, ends with a C. But anyway, I didn't like it at all. Um, anyway, two women, he decided to reveal to them, "Hey, I said I'm in love with both of you. I'm actually in love with three women. Susie's not here. I was in love with." He's like, "I'm in love with all of you." He's like, "I was in love with her. I'm in love with you too, and I slept with both of you." He says this in front of both of them, and they're like, because first leading up to it, he's like, "Oh, I told her I was intimate with someone," and they kind of started looking at each other like, it was probably her, but they both knew that I mean, that's what I got from it, but they both knew that they had slept with him. So it was almost like keeping up the optics, but then he let the cat out of the bag and he's like, hey, I slept with both of you. They're like, oh. So then, I think what hurt them the most was him saying, I'm in love with both of you. I was in love with all three of you, but I'm in love with both of you, and I slept with both of you. I think the being in love with both of them hurt them the most because they're like, how can you be in love with me and love with her at the same time? Like, this makes no sense. You're confused. And this goes back to why I was saying I feel this show works the best for women because these men, they cannot, I'm sorry, comment if you're a man, but and most people know how men fall in love. They can't be dating around different women like this. This is a prime example. They get confused. He's confused at this point. He thinks he's in love with three women. And then he even thinks he was in love with the other one, Susie. But he's literally still in love with Susie. And he was never in love with Rachel and Gabby. That's just it. That's facts. He was never in love with Rachel and Gabby. He was only in love with Susie. When he's telling Rachel and Gabby that he was in love with Susie, he is still, in fact, in love with Susie. And he's just confused. And I think the fact that he had sex with them, which made the women bond with him more than he bonded with them, and them expressing themselves and being vulnerable more than he's being with them, made him even more confused. And the collateral damage was Gabby and Rachel, because Rachel was really in love with Clayton, and he did not love Rachel back the way she loved him, and he did not love Gabby. So they have this crying fest. Gabby walks off. Rachel goes down the steps. This is like a long staircase to get to where the ceremony was. And then there's just like echoes of crying and wailing and crying and suffering and heartbreak just echoing up the stairs of this like vessel, and he's like on the platform absorbing all this pain and heartfelt emotion and hearts breaking. It was horrible to watch. But I did it for you all so I can be here telling you my analysis of it, my recap, my review. Please make sure you're checking out my other videos. I have I think at least two other videos from Clayton season. We also have a playlist for Clayton season and many other videos regarding The Bachelor and other franchise videos. We even have some Love Island on here, and we may branch out and do other reviews. So please check it out. Thanks. So going back to this rose ceremony from hell, as host Jesse called it, it was very, very horrific. Um, Clayton, why did you do that to these girls? Like, seriously, why? So both women, of course, need clarity. They're like, I need to understand, like, what's going on, why you feel this way. Um, Gabby's wondering, like, how he can choose who he loves who he loves at the end of this. And he's like, well, I'm just gonna go with who I love the most. And she's like, love can't be measured. Like, this is love. And I want someone who loves me. I don't want to like compete with who you love the most. This is like not a competition. But then I'm thinking, well, actually it is. It's called The Bachelor. And he's gonna figure out who meshes well with him the most. Maybe not love the most, that's probably not the best term, but who meshes well with him the most so he can then propose to them. And it is a competition in a sense because they do compete in fun games. and that bring out their personality on these games, and they're in the best possible dates to allow themselves to shine in the best possible light. And in the end, there's only one. So it is kind of a competition, but I do understand what she's saying. Like it was, someone put it was very selfish. I think it was the former Bachelor Nick. And he was the Bachelor, I think, twice actually. So he understands. Um, but then he tries to, let's go back. So then he tries to explain to Rachel that the love he has for her and Gabby is different than the love he had for Susie. And he loves everybody differently. And then that kind of reminded me how, like, a parent explains to her children how she loves them all equally, but loves them differently because they're different. And, maybe might vary the way she treats each child differently, but she loves them all the same. It kind of just reminded me, like, I'm like, is he trying to, like, where is this coming from? But I guess, concepts of love and things like this, they may be difficult to explain to someone who may not have been in love before. I can't remember if he's ever been in love before, if he said he's been in love before, or however. But anyway, that cry Rachel was crying, oh my goodness. Many women, maybe even some men, but many women have cried and know that cry, have cried that cry, and said, hey, I'm never going to cry that cry again. So basically, after Gabby rejected the rose, he tries to come back and convince her, hey, come back, keep going, take another step with me. So both of them go to meet the parents, and it goes well. Gabby meets with his parents first. The ladies answer questions. Then, despite it all, Clayton is still thinking about Susie. And he's like, I don't know. I just have to explore this. It's kind of like the one who got away. She's like, I don't know. I just have to explore this and see what's going on there. So then up pops Jesse. And Jesse's like, hey, well, Susie's still in Iceland. So that's how it pretty much ends. It was kind of funny actually, because there he's talking about it and Jesse just comes in. Jesse comes in at the best times, the best times. He must be like around, and I think his journey with Clayton, being that this is his first season with The Bachelor as the new host, I think he took a very hands-on approach, and I think he was around to pop up at any given point in time, because he did certainly pop up at those important times. So, yeah. And that's not to discredit all the years Chris Harrison was a great host. Jesse's doing a good job though, so I have to point that out. So anyway, um, and then he tells Gabby and Rachel, because actually Jesse does go to Susie's room and say, hey, Clayton wants to meet with you. Then Clayton, in the part two of the finale, he go, which is what I'm talking about now. Clayton goes and decides to continue this group session. Like he's treating this as like one big group date now. And he tells Gabby and Rachel that he can't go on because his heart is in another place, i.e., Susie. Gabby storms off. He follows Gabby. They have a little conversation. She's like, hey, I don't believe you were ever in love with me. I was in love with you. You weren't in love with me. And you should have been more upfront about certain things. She then declines his offer to walk her out. And she had a lot of choice words for him. So that's what I'll just say with Gabby. And she did stick up for herself. Excuse me. So then with Rachel, this was more of a teary breakup and goodbye. uh, Rachel was seemed to be very much in shock after he told her and Gabby this startling news. And so Rachel, at first didn't cry or say anything, but then she, does. And I will say after that little confrontation in Iceland, the taped portion, they did go to the live in studio interview, or I would, post interview with Gabby, and then Clayton joined her on the scene, or on the stage, I should say, and she did confront him there as well. And she even said, "Hey, you didn't even ask me like if it was okay for you to reveal that information that basically we slept with him." You know, her and Rachel. So she just basically felt like he did not take her feelings into consideration. And I think that was kind of the theme. He didn't take the woman's feelings into consideration. So he didn't cry or anything, even though Gabby was upset. Then when it came time for Rachel and Clayton to speak post group breakup, that is, um, Rachel's very teary-eyed, and she says that, she believes that he's going to regret this. She's been fighting for him every step of the way. He hasn't fought for her, not once. She's still fighting for him, and she can't believe he's going to send her away in a car. And she's like, "I think you're going to," and he goes, "to regret this." And she's like, "Yeah." But even when he said it with like no emotion. She's crying. She looks a mess with the tears. Individual lashes are like falling off onto her cheekbones. She's wiping them away. By the time she gets into the car, she doesn't have any lashes anymore. That's how much she's crying. And it was just horrible to see. And I think like she stayed on it until the wheels fell off. That's a good quality to have for the man who's actually worth it, probably. I don't know if he was worth it. And fighting for her more than she fought for him. But he did not put up that fight for her. He did not try to keep the relationship together, and he didn't cry. He didn't shed not one tear. And I think on the stage, after that she realized this man is not in love with me. He was emotionless. He just, put her in the car and bye. He just seemed like very, you know, she just wasn't the one for him. But with Susie, he's like, "I'm gonna try to win her back." She did confront, I will say, Rachel confronted Clayton on the stage, and that was one of the things that came up about the lack of emotion and things like that. So with Susie, Clayton's like, "Hey, I'm gonna win her back." He gives a handwritten note to her, agrees to meet with him in a remote countryside. He pours out his heart and said he even took out a ring. He's like, "Yeah, I wanted to propose." They didn't show him in Neil Lane. I was a little disappointed in that. That's like the favorite, one of my favorite scenes of the whole show, when Neil comes with a suitcase full of diamonds, basically, and he's like, "Hey, pick one." We didn't see that this year. I think it was just so controversial, so heartbreaking, heart wrenching, so many tears that it was just like, maybe it's good that Neil didn't want this kind of like associated with his brand. I don't know. I don't know. Okay. Diamonds are forever, but this love that we were seeing did not seem like it was going to be forever with anyone at that time. But things did turn around. So Susie agrees to meet with Clayton and this remote countryside. He pours out his heart. He pops out the ring box. He's like, "Hey, I'm even thinking about proposing." And he does actually say She says she believes him, and but she doesn't feel like she has that unconditional love for him. So we don't know how this thing is going to end up, right? So then they go back to the studio audience. Clayton's talking. He's getting a lot of heat from people. Then Jesse asks Clayton, like, hey, is there someone special in your life? And he's like, yes, there is someone special in my life. And then out pops Susie. Well, from the backstage. She didn't pop out of like a cake or anything. She came from backstage. And they have been together for 4 months. They're boyfriend, girlfriend. They're totally committed. And he's moving in with her. He's moving to Virginia Beach, Virginia. He sold his condo, and he's doing whatever it takes so that they can be together and they could be happy and in love. He even quit his job. So, one last thing, he did give her the final rose, and they seem to gonna be living happily ever after. I really hope that they do. I am rooting for them, just like I'm rooting for you. So anyway, the new Bachelorette is not actually singular, it's plural. The new Bachelorette is actually plural. Two women, Gabby and Rachel. And so I look forward to talking more about their season coming up. And I hope you come back here for that too. I think it's going to be fun. And I think that they definitely deserve to find love. After all the crap that they went through on this season, there could not be a better choice than having them on the show to find their special suitor. And I do believe the show works better for women because women can date multiple men and decide who she wants to choose, who would be best for her. And so I think it's going to end up well for them. I wasn't in love with her and she wasted her time on him, but not the experience. And now she will get to be the Bachelorette along with Gabby in a season for both of them. So, yay! Love prevails. And Clayton's in love, and now they get a shot at love and suitors from all across the nation, maybe even the world. There might be a Canadian or two in there, who knows? And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens. And I hope they do get engaged. And I actually hope Clayton and Susie like get engaged or married. Like maybe they won't get married in Bachelor in Paradise or anything, but I feel like they should get engaged with a Neil Lane Diamond, like in some public way. And we want to see where it ends up, and we want to see an engagement. Darn it. We do. So, and if there is one, I'll be covering it. I'll be following it. Believe me, because that was going to be interesting. So I'm really excited. I am really thanking you for watching this episode of my show. And I'm glad that I hope you enjoyed it, this analysis recap review. I hope you kind of agree with me, but if you don't, that's fine. If you agree, drop me a line in the comment section. If you don't, feel welcome to drop me a line in the comment section. Either way, we like to keep it respectful and fun on this channel in the comments. And I usually reply to all of them, especially if I see your comment. I think there was like one comment in my last video. You can check out my last video about Clayton on my channel. I didn't see the comment, but it was there. So maybe it was inappropriate. Who knows? Because I will not show your inappropriate comment on my channel. I'm just sorry. We're not going to do that this year. 2022. Got no time for you. Okay? All right. Let me stop. Okay. But anyway, thanks again for listening, watching, and subscribing. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks so much. Mwah. Bye.